I do.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Detective David Scott
Detective Scott, where are you currently employed?
with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
16 years.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm currently with the polygraph unit.
And what do you do with the polygraph unit?
It's typical lie detector type stuff. We do both polygraphs on new hires as well as criminal polygraphs.
If you could we walk the jury through your work history since you've been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir, we could. I was assigned for 6 years. My first 6 years was in patrol. And then for 4 years, I was an auto theft detective. And then for 6 years, I was assigned to homicide. And then in November of 2017, I became a polygrapher.
Could you also tell us a little bit some of the training that you have had since you've been employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir, I can. In 2008, I took investigative interviews. In 2009, basic patrol rifle school. In 2012, detective and investigative fundamentals. In 2012, case preparation and court presentation. And then in 2017, psychophysiological detection of deception.
So I want to focus back on your time when you were a homicide detective, and more specifically, where were you assigned back on January the 29th, 2016?
I was assigned to the homicide unit.
And while you were assigned to the homicide unit, were you assigned as the lead detective in the murder of Aiden McClendon?
Yes, sir, I was.
And so have you worked on that case from January 29th, 2016, really through present?
Yes, sir, I did.
If you could briefly explain, how do you specifically get assigned a case when you're a detective in the homicide division?
A homicide team is based of 4 homicide detectives and a homicide sergeant, and we are on call. At the time, it was on a 24-hour rotating basis per team. We were on call that day, and then between the 4 detectives, being assigned the lead detective is also amongst the 4 detectives assigned on a rotating basis.
And so when you lead, do you also have a team of people around you, meaning other people who work within the sheriff's office?
Oh, absolutely.
So does that include like even the patrol, as far as they play a role in the homicide investigation?
Absolutely.
What's their important for them?
Obviously, they're the first to respond to the scene, so they get there, assess the situation, the safety, and then they provide the integrity of the scene, potentially identify any witnesses, secure any witnesses, but essentially their role there is to protect the integrity of the scene.
And so also part of this team, does that include evidence technicians?
Yes, sir, it does.
And what role do they play in the homicide investigation?
They collect and process and photograph any evidence at the scene.
Does it also include the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as part of this team?
Yes, sir, it does.
And what do they do?
They process evidence, for example, DNA. The majority of what I have used them for is DNA analysis and firearms analysis.
And did you also, in this specific case, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, have the involvement of a lab called DNA Labs International?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, I know that this was a long investigation, but I sort of want to focus and ask you about some specific areas that you were involved with during the investigation. So when you were first notified of Aiden McClendon's death, where did you respond?
I responded to 710 Spearing Street.
And then later that evening, did you meet with Tamisha Brown?
Yes, later that evening. Actually, it was very, very early the next morning.
Was it around 2:02 in the morning?
Yes, sir, it was right around that time.
Did you have a brief conversation with her?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when I say brief, was it relatively brief?
It was brief, yes.
And why was that?
She was arriving as I was leaving her apartment in a vehicle. She was obviously very emotional, very distraught. I can only imagine it was one of the most, if not the most traumatic day of her life. So
Sustain.
All right. Due to what had just happened, is it a fair statement that is why it was a brief conversation?
Yes, it was a brief conversation.
Was she able to, when you had that initial brief conversation, specifically identify anyone who was involved as far as shooters in the white Toyota Corolla?
The only description she gave me was the person in the front passenger seat shooting had a mask covering his face, and the person in the right rear passenger seat was a fair-skinned black male.
And did she tell you that she'd gotten a clear look at the lighter-skinned black male?
She just described him as a fair-skinned black male.
But that she'd gotten a clear look at him?
Sustain.
Did she describe the face as far as the coloration of the person who was in the front seat with the mask?
No, she didn't. She just said he had a mask on.
Did she say the color of his skin?
No.
Did she tell you that he was African American?
She said he had a mask on.
Okay. Did she know either of their identities based on what she'd seen?
She did not indicate that to me at that time, no.
Did you also speak with Tamisha Brown's mother, Rhonda McDowell?
Rhonda McDowell was in the vehicle with Tamisha Brown when I spoke to them both briefly that initial time.
And you also conducted that evening an interview of Jordan Harris?
Yes, sir, I did.
And conducted an interview of Thomas Brown?
Yes, sir, I did.
And Thomas Brown is the brother of Tamisha Brown?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What about an individual by the name of Reginald Ducey Williams? Did you talk to him at any point that day?
No, sir, not that day. I did not.
Did you talk to him the next day?
No, sir, I don't believe it was the next day.
Were you attempting to get in touch with him?
Yes, sir, we were looking for him to try to speak with him.
On January the 30th, at 5:11 p.m., did you receive a phone call from Rhonda McDowell? And I don't want to go into the contents, but I'm just asking if you did.
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe at this time it would be appropriate to excuse the Kwame Brown jury, or the Kwame Richardson jury. Now, this call that you received from Rhonda McDowell, did it relate to a Facebook photograph that Thomas Brown had received from Jamari Brooks?
Yes, sir, it did.
During the conversation that you were having with Rhonda McDowell, could you hear Tamisha Brown in the background?
Yes, sir, I could.
Was she screaming?
Yes, sir, she was.
Distraught?
Absolutely.
What could you hear Tamisha Brown screaming?
That's the person that shot my baby. That's the person that shot my baby.
Did you ask for that Facebook photograph to be sent to you?
I did.
Did you also ask to meet with Tamisha Brown at the Police Memorial Building?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did she come down?
Yes, I asked Ms. McDowell to bring Tamisha Brown down to so I could speak with her further.
Your Honor, if I could approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has been entered into evidence at State Exhibit 413. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is that?
That is the photograph that was emailed to me by, I believe it was Ms. McDowell's daughter, LaHonda Fleming, of the photograph that was sent to Thomas Brown.
So, when you met with Tamisha Brown, did you ask her about that Facebook photograph?
We spoke about it, yes, sir.
What did she tell you as regarding one of the individuals in the photograph?
She identified the person on the right in the photograph as the person in the right rear passenger seat shooting.
And at that time, did she say that was a light-skinned black male in the rear passenger seat of the white Toyota Corolla?
At that time, did she?
Yeah, did you discuss that with her, that that was who, where, the person she identified, where did she say he was located in the Corolla?
The right rear passenger seat.
Do you see the person that she identified in the photo in the courtroom here today?
I do.
Could you please point out where he's sitting and identify him if you can?
Your Honor, you mind if I stand up?
You may, sir.
It's the gentleman in the light blue shirt with the black and blue striped tie.
Your Honor, if the record could reflect that Detective Scott has identified Henry Hayes before.
The record would so reflect.
Now, did you use a photo spread in this case?
No, sir, I didn't.
And if you could tell the jury what a photo spread is.
A photo spread is a set of photographs. It typically contains a suspect or a person of interest and what we call 5 filler photographs.
And the purpose of the photo spread is?
To identify a suspect.
And so you've got various photos and the person selects one, if they can.
Correct.
In this case, you didn't use a photo spread.
No, sir, I did not.
And why is that?
Well, because Miss Brown had identified known to be Mr. Hayes from a single photograph outside of my presence and on her own. So I saw no need to put a photo spread together of somebody that she had already identified from a single photograph. There was no need to put this same person in a photo spread with 5 other random individuals.
So let me ask you this. Obviously you met with her related to this Facebook photo. Did you have the opportunity to observe her when she was identifying Henry Hayes?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you observe any hesitancy?
No hesitancy whatsoever.
You've interviewed hundreds of people in your role as a detective?
Hundreds, if not thousands, yes, sir.
And you're currently assigned as a polygrapher?
That's correct.
And you have received specialized training in determining whether people show signs of deception?
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you see any signs of deception that you recognize?
Hold on. Restate your question, Mr. Hutton. I'm not sure I quite
Ask
followed.
if she recognized any signs of deception in Tamisha Brown when she identified Henry Hayes.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Did you also discuss with Tamisha Brown the location as far as where her vehicle had been at the time of the shooting?
Yes, sir, I did.
I'm going to show you what has been admitted into evidence as States 15. You
Yes, sir.
recognize this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Now, were you able to pinpoint an exact location as far as where her vehicle had been?
No, sir, not an exact location. She told me she was parked in the front yard where you see that drive there, with the front of the vehicle facing towards the front of the house and the rear of the vehicle taken from Albert Street, which is about where the photographer taking this picture would be standing.
And if you could mark on the photograph with your finger where it was she said she was.
I would say this general area here.
Try it again.
Did it not?
It didn't show up. All right.
Is that better?
You know, at this point, it would be appropriate to bring the Richardson jury back in. God, I apologize for having you ask this question again, but I want to make sure that we share it with everyone involved in this case. During your discussion with Tamisha Brown, did you ask her about the location of her vehicle at the time that the shooting occurred?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was she able to pinpoint an exact location?
It wasn't an exact location. What she described as being in the driveway with her, this dirt driveway with the front of her car facing the front of the house and the rear of the vehicle facing Albert Street, which, viewing from this photo, I believe would be about where the picture would be taken.
All right.
But
If you could mark with your finger on this photograph where it was that Tamisha Brown approximated her position to be. Thank you. And could you tell me why you weren't able to pinpoint precisely, meaning this exact spot where her vehicle was?
because after the shooting, Miss Brown took her child, obviously directly to Shands Hospital for immediate medical care.
I touched on this before, but I want to go back to Reginald Ducey Williams. Were you finally able to meet with Mr. Williams on January 31st, 2016 at 1:14 p.m.?
Yes, sir, I was.
And again, this event, the murder of Aiden McClendon, happened at 6:05 p.m. on Friday.
That's correct.
When you met with Reginald Ducey Williams, was he cooperative with you?
No, sir, I would not say he was cooperative.
Did you do anything to try to assist the process to get him to speak with you?
I did. I called Miss McDowell and asked her and Tamisha Brown to come down due to him. I did not feel he was giving me the story of the truth of what happened. I was hoping that they could speak to him, being family, to assist me with getting him to talk to me and tell me the truth about what happened.
Did Tamisha Brown and Rhonda McDowell agree to come down to assist you?
Yes, sir, they did.
Did they meet with Reginald Ducey Williams related to that?
Yes, sir.
Were their efforts successful?
No, sir, they weren't.
Has that ever changed? Has Reginald Ducey Williams ever cooperated with law enforcement related to this case?
No, sir.
Did you also meet with a person by the name of Jamari Brooks?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you interview him?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was he able to identify anyone that he had seen at the Gate gas station the same night between 8 and 9 p.m. that's located at 45th Street in Moncrief?
Yes, sir, he did.
Were you advised that they were standing outside a white Toyota Corolla with dark tint?
Yes, sir.
Overruled.
Who was he able to identify?
He identified JB and Cracker Jack as standing outside the white Toyota Corolla with the dark tint at the Gate gas station.
Beyond providing you with that information, was he otherwise cooperative?
Yes, sir, he certainly was that day.
Now, based on that information, did you go to the Gate gas station at 45th and Moncrief and see if they had video footage?
Yes, we did.
Did you collect that footage?
Yes, sir, we did.
And did you review that footage?
Yes, sir, we have.
What were you able to see in that footage?
We weren't able to locate anything of evidentiary value. The way the cameras were positioned, you could see white vehicles and people moving around, but nothing where I could specifically identify this suspect vehicle or the suspects. The cameras weren't close enough.
And so the angle of the camera, was it pointing towards the front of the store? Your Honor, he's reviewed the footage. They have the footage.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, sir, will you repeat the
Can
question?
you tell me about the camera angle?
There were multiple camera angles, but none of them were of evidentiary value to me after reviewing the video.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask again to excuse the Richardson jury. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. You may.
March the 10th, 2016, did you have the opportunity to meet with and interview Henry Hayes related to the murder of Aiden McClendon?
Yes, sir, I did.
Was that interview recorded, both audio and video?
Yes, sir, it was.
Now, I'm not going to show you the audio and video, but I want to ask you about some very specific parts of that interview.
Okay.
Did you read and explain to him his constitutional rights?
Yes, sir, I did.
Was this done in a written format?
Yes, sir, it was.
Did you have him read it aloud to make sure that he understood his rights?
I had him read the first line out loud, and then I read the rest to him.
And did you have him initial next to each one of his rights?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you have him sign indicating that he understood his rights?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did he agree to speak with you?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has been filed for identification in Henry Hayes' case as Exhibit 22D. You recognize this?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is that?
That is his constitutional rights form that we reviewed during his interview on March the 10th.
In the constitutional rights form that he signed?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm introduced as the state's next. Piece of evidence.
Objection?
No objection.
Be so admitted.
I'm advised by the court that it's already been entered. I did not realize that. Does it have it's been entered as 533?
Be so admitted as State's Exhibit 533. Oh, she's saying that the identification number is duplicative, correct? Yes. All right, so it's not been admitted. That document hasn't been admitted, but something else with that identification number has been. Okay. All right, so what's this State's Exhibit then, Madam?
Hayes, Judge,
For Hayes,
it would be 535.
State's Exhibit 535.
You remember talking to him, Mr. Hayes, after he signed and agreed to speak with you, after he signed his constitutional rights, related to whether he was a member of a gang?
Oh, yes, sir, that came up.
And what did he tell you?
He essentially said he tried to distance himself from those types of people and stated that he liked to hang out with the ladies.
Did you specifically ask him about whether he was a member of Problem Child Entertainment?
I did.
And what did he tell you?
I didn't get a response.
Did you ask him what his telephone number was?
I did.
And what telephone number did he provide to you?
904-405-5248.
Did you question Mr. Hayes as to whether he had ever owned or possessed a firearm?
Yes, sir, I did. On multiple occasions, he said he doesn't play with guns.
Did you ask him about a white Toyota Corolla?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did he tell you if he had any information or he knew anything about a white Toyota Corolla?
He said he did not.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Identification Exhibit number 22B.
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, sir.
And what is this?
It's the white Toyota Corolla.
Your Honor, may I publish this to the jury?
You may.
First, I guess I need to move it into evidence. This would be State's
objection? It's already. No objection. I think that photographs.
It's already been entered as a, so.
Bless you.
Now, the photograph of that white Toyota Corolla that I just showed to the jury, what is that a photograph of?
That is of the suspect vehicle.
The vehicle that was taken from Shatoya Williams?
Correct.
All right. The reason I ask you about that, did you specifically show Mr. Hayes that vehicle, that photograph?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did that jog his memory?
No, sir.
Did he ever at any point say that he knew anything about the white Toyota Corolla in that photograph?
No, sir, he did not.
Your Honor, at this time, I believe the Richardson jury could come back in. Now, Detective Scott, I want to ask you if you are familiar with a person by the name of Sanquan Bradford.
Yes, sir, I am.
And Sanquan Bradford is the individual who was arrested for the carjacking of Shatoya Williams?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And because you believe that that white Toyota Corolla was related to the homicide investigation, did you take part in the interview of Mr. Bradford when he was arrested?
Yes, sir, I did.
And during the initial interview after he was arrested, did he deny involvement?
Grounds? I didn't hear you. Sustained.
I want to ask you, you obviously got a chance to see him at the time that you interviewed him.
Yes, sir.
And did he have short hair at the time that you met with him?
I don't recall exactly what his hair looked like, sir.
Do you remember if he had a crown haircut, meaning that he had hair that stuck up that came out from multiple angles?
We're talking about Mr. Bradford?
Mr. Bradford.
I can't be absolutely sure on that, sir, no, sir.
Let me ask you about on August the 25th, 2016. Did you receive an inmate request from Sanquan Bradford?
Yes, sir, I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I want to show you what has been filed for identification in State's Exhibit 21Q.
Yes, sir,
Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
It is an inmate request form with Sanquan Bradford requesting that he would like to speak with me.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to move this into evidence for the State's next exhibit.
Objections?
No objection.
Will be so admitted.
Judge, it will be 537 for Hayes and 532 for Richardson.
537 for Hayes and 532 for Richardson. It will be admitted with those numbers.
Your Honor, may the witness read the information contained on this form?
It's in evidence. You may do so.
It says, Detective Scott, I would like to speak with you as soon as possible. Ronald Thomas told me I can trust you. I got information. I want justice for the family. Signed, Sanquan Bradford.
And when is it dated again?
August the 25th of 2016.
So as a result of receiving that request, did you meet with Sanquon Bradford?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you interviewed him?
Yes, sir.
He discussed with you his involvement in the carjacking?
Yes.
And are you aware that he agreed to cooperate with law enforcement?
Yes, I am.
And you're also aware he pled guilty to robbery?
Yes, sir, I am.
And you're aware that Sanquon Bradford has cooperated with law enforcement since August 26, 2016?
Yes, sir, I am.
Now, part of your investigation as the lead detective is submitting evidence that's been collected for further scientific testing.
That's correct.
Did you collect a MAC 97.62 by 39 assault rifle and any live rounds recovered from 1846 Helena Street?
Yes, we did submit that to FDLE for analysis.
What about a Glock 26 recovered during a traffic stop on February 7, 2016?
Yes, sir, we did.
What about any casings and any live rounds found from the scene at 710 Spearing Street or in that general area around 710 Spearing Street?
Yes, sir, we did.
I'll ask you this question, maybe everybody understands, but what is a casing?
A casing is, obviously you have the bullet at the tip and then typically like a brass or silver casing that contains the gunpowder with a firing pin at the end of the casing. So when the trigger is pulled, the bullet obviously goes through the barrel of the gun, and on a semi-automatic gun, a casing is ejected from the gun.
So sort of in layman's terms, the casing holds the bullet that's fired?
Yes, sir, in layman's terms, yes.
Did you also submit any evidence related from Tamisha Brown's vehicle?
Yes.
Did you also submit any casings or other evidence collected from the suspect vehicle, meaning the vehicle taken from Shatoya Williams?
Yes, sir, we did.
Did you also submit DNA swabs collected from the firearms casings in Shatoya Williams' vehicle?
Yes, we did.
And that included any swabbing from the interior driver's door of the suspect vehicle?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Did you also submit a DNA sample of Aiden McClendon that was collected by the medical examiner during the autopsy?
Yes, we did.
So these things that we're talking about that were collected, did you submit these to FDLE for firearms testing as applicable?
As applicable to firearms or to DNA, depending on what we were submitting. Yes, sir, we did.
And FDLE has the specially trained people who analyze the evidence that you submit.
Absolutely.
In addition to FDLE, did you also submit the swabs from the Glock 26 to DNA Labs International for testing?
Yes, we did.
And why is that?
At the time, DNA Labs International had a more sophisticated method for analyzing the DNA, so the decision was made that we would submit this evidence to DNA Labs International, which is a private firm located in South Florida.
In this advanced testing method, are you aware that's called Star Mix?
I'm aware it's called Star Mix, yes, sir.
All right, did you also submit DNA samples collected from certain individuals related to your investigation?
Yes, sir, we did.
And related to that, that means you actually collected DNA samples from individuals related to this case.
That's correct.
When we talk about that you collected a DNA sample from a person, what does that mean?
Basically, when I collect a DNA sample, I will have two cheek swabs, which essentially look like a long Q-tip. I put latex gloves on. I will open the end that the Q-tip is not on, so where the Q-tip will be at the bottom. I open the top of that. I ask the person that I'm collecting the swab from to remove it, swab the inside of their cheek, and then I have them put it back in the original packet. This is done twice. Typically, I have them do it on each cheek. I then have them placed in a manila envelope where I seal the manila envelope with evidence tape, and I write their name on it in front of them so they know that that's their DNA being collected.
And then the collection of the DNA for analysis actually comes from the scrubbing of the inside of the cheek?
That's correct.
Now, I want to ask you about some of the individuals that you collected DNA samples from during the investigation. So we already discussed that you had the DNA sample from Aiden McClendon that you got from the medical examiner's office.
Yes, sir.
And then did you collect a DNA sample from Cynthia Hayes?
I did.
And why is that?
Cynthia Hayes was in the vehicle at the time, February 7th, at the time the Glock 26 was recovered.
Did you also obtain a DNA sample from Henry Hayes III?
I did.
That's the father of Henry Hayes, the defendant?
Yes, sir.
And why was that?
Because it was his vehicle.
Did you also obtain a DNA sample from Montico Tico Brown?
Yes, sir, I did.
And why was that?
Because his name kept coming up in the investigation, and he is a known PCE member.
Did you also obtain a DNA sample from Kobe Kojak Norris?
Yes, sir, I did.
Why did you obtain a DNA sample from him?
Again, his name had come up in the investigation, and he's a known PCE member.
Did you also collect a DNA sample from Sanquan Bradford?
I did.
And why was that?
Because, again, his name kept coming up in the investigation.
Did you also collect and submit a DNA sample related to Henry Hayes before?
Yes, sir, I did.
The defendant in this case.
Correct.
Did you also obtain and submit a DNA sample related to Kwame Richardson?
Yes, sir, I did.
And why did you collect DNA samples from those two?
For the same reason, their names kept coming up in the investigation, and we collect these samples and have them tested for the inclusion or exclusion of being a suspect or related to the case.
When you say inclusion or exclusion, what are you talking about?
Inclusion is their DNA is found to be on something, or exclusion, their DNA is found not to be on something, without me testifying as a DNA witness expert.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has been previously entered, but I still want to show you into evidence as State's Exhibit 368, 367, 366, 365, 364, 363, 362, 361, 360, 359, 369. Could you review those to confirm these are the samples that you submitted for testing?
Yes, sir. This one is going to be Aiden McClendon's blood spot card collected from medical examiner's office.
So we don't need to go through every one of them. If you'll just review them and confirm these are the ones you submitted.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Nope, you dropped them.
Gentlemen, may I publish one of the jury so they can see what it was I was talking about related to swabs?
You may, yes, sir.
Related to your investigation, did you actually come into possession of a phone belonging to Sanquon Bradford?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you conduct what's known, or attempt to conduct what's known as a phone download with that phone?
Yes, sir.
What type of information is gathered through a phone download?
Our computer forensics unit will conduct a phone download, and typically what's obtained is call log history, a contact list, depending on what type of phone. If it's a smartphone, sometimes it'll web browsing history, text messages, things of that nature.
Now, with regard to Sanquon Bradford's phone, did you have difficulties with the download, so you had to actually screenshot the information contained on it?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Did you also obtain a search warrant for Henry Crackerjack Hayes' cell phone and the records associated with Mr. Hayes' cell phone?
Yes, sir, I did.
After obtaining that search warrant, did you have a download performed by the JSO homicide crime analyst?
It was actually the JSO computer forensics unit, but yes, sir, I did.
And so they actually had the phone itself and did a download of it?
Correct.
Were you able to conduct a phone download of Kwame Richardson's phone?
No, sir, I was not,
Why is that?
because I never had his phone, and I did not learn until I received his phone records some months later that the phone number that I had for him was not activated until February 1st of 2016.
After the date of the homicide?
Correct.
Do you have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I did have one other question, Detective Scott. I meant to ask you, there was a cell phone that was evidence number 12. Is that the cell phone that belonged to Jordan Harris?
Yes, sir, I believe it was.
That's all the questions I have at this time, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the jury is for cross-examination. I'm going to let Mr. Hernandez go first. So, folks in the Richardson jury, if you can once again go back to the jury room, we'll be back with you in just a moment. Ms. Crawford, if you can lead them out. All right, let the record reflect that the Richardson jury has left the courtroom. Mr. Hernandez, you may cross-examine.
Good afternoon, Detective Scott.
Good morning, sir. Or afternoon.
Yeah, just a few minutes after, right?
Okay.
Good seeing you again.
Good to see you too, sir.
The photo spread lineup done by JSO, y'all try to be as fair as possible, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When you do a six-pack, you have 6 individual photos, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And y'all try to get them to look as similar to the suspect as possible, right?
Yes, sir, I would say that's accurate. If there's facial hair, for example, or we try to get the same style hair, things like that, yes, sir.
Okay. That's because, in other words, if you've got a Caucasian suspect, you're not going to put the suspect in the photo spread with 5 African-American photos, are you?
No, sir, I would not.
And then whenever you do the photo spread, you tell the person that's reviewing the photo spread that the suspect may or may not be in the photo spread, right?
Yes, sir, we have actually written instructions of what we read when we present a photo spread.
Right. And you go by those written instructions, right?
Yes, sir, we do.
And that's to be fair, is that correct?
It's to be fair, yes, sir.
The, what you testified to in direct for the location of the vehicle on the driveway, that was through your conversation with the mother, is that right?
Correct.
In other words, several days later or the next day, you didn't have the mother meet you out at the grandmother's house and say, where was your vehicle when you initially took fire, did you?
No, sir, I did not meet her at the scene.
Okay. In the estimated location of the vehicle, you didn't do a measurement from the estimated location of the vehicle to Albert Street, is that right?
I don't recall if the evidence technicians did that or not. No, sir.
That might be a question better asked for that evidence technician, right?
Could be.
Okay, good enough. The interview with my client took about 4 hours, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I believe that's about accurate. As far as when we do a interview, we do what we call door-to-door, where the recording device is turned on prior to them entering the room and not turned off till after we leave the room. So we may not be in with the person we're interviewing the entire time, but it is being recorded the entire time.
Okay. Well, am I accurate on the total amount of time?
As far as the recording goes?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. My client was 16 at the time, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Was his father in with the interview also?
He did show up, yes, sir, eventually.
I know, but did he participate in the interview? Was he sitting beside his son during the interview?
During a brief portion of it, he was.
Okay, about how long was that?
An approximate time?
Yes.
I could approximately say 10 minutes.
Okay. Whenever you said there was nothing of evidentiary value at the gate station at 45th and Moncrief, another fair way to say it is that you didn't see my client in that video. Is that correct?
I think the fairest way to say it is you could tell that there was white vehicles and that there was people moving around, but you could not identify who was moving around. So I think the fairest way to explain it is I can't say whether or not he was there due to the recording and not being able to identify individual faces or models of cars, that kind of thing.
Okay, so basically you were able to identify that the car was white, but you couldn't even identify the model of the car. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. The only picture you showed, the mother, whenever she came down to the police memorial building, was the picture that she had emailed you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The interview of my client, did it take place at the detention center off of 8th Street for juveniles, or did it take place at the main police memorial building?
At the police memorial building.
Your Honor, I have no other questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hayes' jury, I'll have you go back to the jury room for just a little bit. And if you're getting hungry, we're going to be breaking for lunch here as soon as we're finished with this witness, okay?
Detective Scott, you indicated that Ms. Brown told you that the individual who was on the front passenger side of the vehicle had a mask on. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And she gave you no other description as to complexion. Is that also true?
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that you spoke with a Jamari Brooks. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You recall what date that was?
I would have to review my report to give you the exact date.
Okay. Do you know if it was the night of this incident?
No, sir. Or no, ma'am, it wasn't the night of the incident.
Now, when you spoke with Mr. Brooks, do you recall him telling you that he was driving by real fast when he saw this white car?
No, ma'am, I don't recall him saying that at all.
Okay. Do you recall him saying that he really didn't know the second person who was out there?
No, ma'am. He identified who was out there.
And he told you that he knew both of those individuals, is that correct?
He identified them as Cracker Jack and JB. Yes, ma'am.
That he knew both of them?
Yes, he identified them. Yes, ma'am.
You know why Mr. Brooks would come in and say he didn't know the second person who was out there?
No, I do not.
Now, you indicated that Mr. Bradford sent you that kite in August 2016, is that correct? Or the note, I guess, the note, the request.
The inmate request form, yes, ma'am.
Okay, how long had he been in jail at that time?
A few months. I couldn't give you the exact amount without reviewing the information.
Okay, so he'd been there for a few months, and had he attempted to give you any information prior to this?
Not to the best of my recollection.
And you, in fact, had spoken to him at least on one occasion, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you testified on direct examination that Mr. Richardson activated his phone on February 1st, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. Mr. Richardson didn't have a phone until February 1st, is that correct?
I cannot say that, no, ma'am. I'm just saying with the phone records that I obtained, that phone was activated on February 1st.
Okay. Now, you did have some information for a phone number connected to Mr. Richardson prior to February 1st, is that correct?
I did not have any information. I asked my crime analysis unit to attempt to identify a phone number for him prior to that.
And the number you had was his mother's number, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you attempt any analysis on that phone number?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And it wasn't like Mr. Richardson had a phone and turned it off and then turned it back on February 1st. You just don't have any information that he had a phone prior to that. Is that correct?
I don't know whether he had a phone or not prior to that.
I don't have any further questions.
All right, Mr. Hutton, redirect.
If I heard her correctly, I believe counsel insinuated that Jamari Brooks at some point stated that he couldn't recognize the second individual at the gate gas station? Has he ever said that to you?
No, sir, he hasn't said that to me.
At any point or at any time during this investigation?
No, when I initially interviewed him, he was very clear.
As far as related to the phone for Kwame Richardson, and you were asked about his mother's cell phone, did you have any information or receive any information at all during the investigation that Kwame Richardson was using his mother's phone?
No, sir, I did not.
I don't have any other questions.
Yes, ma'am.
You only interviewed Mr. Brooks one time, is that correct?
Yes, one time, but then I saw him again later at the state attorney's office.
All right, do you have redirect, I guess, do you have brief redirect on Mr. Hayes?
Nothing else on me.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, just retire back to the jury room. We'll be right back with you in just a few minutes, okay?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Now, Detective Scott, related to the questions about the photo spread and the Facebook photo, in today's day and age, is this unusual that you run into potential victims who are able to identify someone from Facebook?
Yes, sir. Through my 6-year career in homicide, I notice more and more of people identifying people through Facebook and social media. Social media has become so prevalent that that we see that more and more. So sometimes they bring something prior to me knowing it. So yes, I would say that's accurate. Yes, sir.
So in today's day and age, the photos are readily available and people can access them and look themselves.
Yes, sir, but because social media is so prevalent out there with Facebook, et cetera, that absolutely, I would say that's correct.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
All right, bring in the Richardson jury, please.